Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Friday evening to you all. Hope you guys are doing awesome out there tonight. Had yourselves a wonderful day. Appreciate y'all joining in for this evening's video. The big topic will be the tropics. We're going to speak on a tropical wave that will have an opportunity to come off the coast of Africa, get over the Atlantic, and then have a shot to develop. If it does develop, does it threaten anybody? The Caribbean, the lower 48. So we're going to speak on all that, compare model guidance. We'll have a nerding out section of the video, if you will. We'll speak on steering currents. Like I said, if it does develop, where does it go? And then we'll talk about if the Atlantic in general is favorable for tropical activity. We'll talk on sea surface temperatures, things like that. And then we'll have a segment for the back half of the video, speaking a little bit closer to home. We continue to watch energy that could sneak over the open waters of the Gulf or off the eastern seaboard, and something that we call homegrown activity could get going. So we'll speak on the chances of that also. If you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. If anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, please put it in the comments below. Let's get rocking and rolling tonight. So let's see if this is going to work for us, and it is, so we're good to go. So we are continuing just to watch this area of unsettled weather right here. I think the last update I saw from the National Hurricane Center had a 10% chance to develop, and I'll show you that here in a second, but this is not going to develop. And by the way, the next named storm is the D name Dexter. So this is not going to take the name Dexter or anything like that. So there's a lot of shower and storm activity also here in the Western Caribbean. And when I say shower and storm activity, or if I use the word convection, like I said, that's just shower and storm activity. And this is being indicated by these colors you're seeing on your screen, which is colder cloud tops. These stronger storms, they pop off stronger, more intense updrafts and taller updrafts. The taller up they go, the colder it gets in the atmosphere. And this is reflected by these colors you're seeing here in like the reds and the blacks, oranges, things like that. So let's get that back off your screen. This is the leftovers of what we call Invest 94L. We're not even going to discuss that anymore. The Central Atlantic's pretty quiet, but this is a big area we're going to discuss here in a second. And then we're, watching Africa, which is right here. We're going to watch some energy, a tropical wave, maybe a few that might, even merge together. And eventually this will get into this area right here, have a shot to develop somewhere out in this area right here. And then if it does it go this way? Does it go that way? Does it not develop at all? But these are sort of the pieces of the puzzle out here in the Atlantic right now. And honestly, the main piece of the puzzle that we're going to discuss really isn't on the picture right at this second or out here in the Atlantic. But I did want to show you this and what was going on. I do think one of the main pieces to the puzzle, if you will, is this blob of energy that's over Africa right now. Obviously, you can tell it's not over the Atlantic, which is right here, still over Africa. But I think this is a piece or one of the tropical waves or the tropical wave that will have a shot to develop once it gets over the Atlantic. So I did just want to show you that. That's interesting. And we can say that that's a tropical wave, but it might not be. This might fizzle out, and then, just the moisture might generate another tropical wave. So that's what we're watching here. Now, the latest from the National Hurricane Center, and I do want to mention, and I updated this for a reason, the National Hurricane Center will drop another update here in about an hour. So I'm making this video around 6:30 Eastern time. So about an hour, they'll do another update. This little area right here in the northwestern Gulf still has a 10% chance to develop, but it literally is just running out of hours, and it's running out of ocean. So if it's going to do something, it's got to do it sometime in the next, literally, the overnight period tonight. So one thing I am watching, though, guys, is I'm going to move this to yellow. I really think we're going to get a 10 to 20% chance, maybe even 30% chance of tropical development that gets issued somewhere in this region right here in the next update or two. And it might happen right after I drop this video. Just know that I do see it, but I am predicting them to put in kind of an area of interest, the potential for tropical development somewhere in this region, 10 to 30% chance of tropical development. So I think we really will wake up tomorrow morning when we do our morning video to that, but we will watch it. That is my call. That's Mitch's call, if you will. So let's continue to move forward. Let's go over model guide. So this is the GFS run from this afternoon, and we're going to start all this off for 12Z Sunday, which is Zulu time for pretty much Sunday morning. So I want you to kind of watch down here. All right, already initializing as some sort of lower pressure, a 1015 millibar low, and as we continue to move forward here in time, we get into Tuesday, we get into Wednesday, and then we get into Thursday. And you're seeing a pretty decent blob of energy down here in the greens and the, the yellows, orange, and reds. That's a tropical wave. Now watch as we get into Friday of next week. At this point, I mean, we're just inside a week out, right? This is next Friday, August the 1st, by the way. So we're entering that prime month for hurricane activity. We got a decent, kind of petite, if you will, kind of smaller a tropical system. And I think it's smaller because of a lot of dry air on top of the system to the north. So this will continue. 1,005 millibar low around this time next week is what the GFS is showing. Okay, so one would argue that's a tropical storm. That's Dexter. This gets into the Lesser Antilles as a 995 millibar low, which could be a mid-grade strong, weak tropical storm. Heck, could be a low-end hurricane. Okay, now let's flip it to this graphic. All right, so this shows obviously more of the lower 48 and all of the Caribbean here. 995, same thing, 18Z. Next Saturday, not this Saturday, next Saturday, August the 2nd. We keep this going here, and it begins to weaken this in the Eastern Caribbean. We call this the graveyard of the Caribbean. A lot of times in this area here, and a lot of times it's really any time of the year during hurricane season, we get really hostile conditions, a lot of wind shear, and things really struggle to keep going in this area. That's why that millibar begins to rise. So the lower you see this number, the stronger the low pressure. The higher, the weaker the low pressure. And we continue to keep this going, and it kind of just remains and eventually weakens into just back into a tropical wave as it gets south of, Jamaica. And we can analyze this until the cows come home because it's going to flip a lot. But eventually this plows just a lot of moisture into the Yucatan, and then that's all she wrote. Now, there's a new GFS run, which, by the way, we only got about a week out, so we can't see the entire run. But if we keep going here, same thing, we get into about Wednesday. There's a low pressure here. Okay, we get into Thursday. There it is. And now it has this, a little bit weaker at this point. So this is around this time next week, right? And this is as far as we can go. If we compare this to the model run before it, has a stronger low pressure, a little bit lower in latitude. So I'm not sure where this run is going to go. Maybe at the very end of the update, we can kind of go back to this and show it to you. So I'll keep this tab up. But what about the Euro from this afternoon, okay? So same thing. We'll start off Sunday morning. We're seeing just a blob of green and splashes of yellow and red down there at the bottom of your screen. That's our tropical wave. And as we start to get into, Thursday, that wave really weakens in this area. And this, I could see this happening. This, being a somewhat healthy tropical wave and then getting sort of here and the western, starting to sneak into the southwestern Atlantic, and then maybe encountering some wind shear, gaining some latitude, maybe hitting some, drier air. But I do think conditions could become more favorable if this wave kind of remains intact and gets into the southwest Atlantic. So, we take this into Saturday morning. That's our wave. You can see it pretty well on your screen, bringing a lot of tropical showers and downpours and storms across the greater Antilles and the northern Lesser Antilles and just Puerto Rico and stuff like that. So we're going to flip it to this now. So this moves us a little bit further west. That wave is still here. You can barely see it. It's just losing some steam. And then I know we're getting past 10 days out, but it's something to watch. This is how long we watch these systems when they're way out in the Atlantic. We watch them forever, like 10, 15 days in some cases. And it actually tries to strengthen here as it pulls away. So a better way to look at this is the lower level energy in the atmosphere. So this is 850 millibar vort. So it's the lower level, like 4,000 to 6,000 feet above the ocean in this case. And this is our tropical wave right here. That's a tropical wave. And watch as it kind of does like this. So this is another way to look at it. When you have such a weaker low pressure like what it's showing off the Euro, it's a great way to look at things. So the wave is there. And you can see how some of those yellows start to turn orange, which indicates stronger energy in the lower levels of the atmosphere. And then it kind of hangs out near, the Bahamas, and then it, hooks in north and then begins to head on out, okay, around a high pressure. So it's very interesting to me. And, even if you look at the Euro AI model, it shows that tropical wave. And in this case, it just kind of shows a blob of moisture here, right? This is next Saturday morning. And, we start to get into next Sunday morning. And all it really shows is a blob of green here. Nothing too impressive. Not a whole lot to look at here. But, as we get into about 10 days out, still there. And it gets a little bit further west in the actual Euro. But it's still a weak low pressure. There's not a whole lot to talk about. But it's interesting, I really think so far this hurricane season is really a classic slowly getting active, not like a snap of your finger, things are just going haywire. It looks like things are just slowly waking up. So this is what we call the Euro Ensemble, and this is the latest one, and the EPS makes up 51 members. On this that you're seeing on your screen, it's going to throw all the low pressures that it forms, at least in decent strength, on the screen. So it's not that we have every one of these L's is a tropical system at the same time. So I don't want you guys to think that. This kind of throws all the members on your screen. You look at it for a signal. So we keep going here and say we get into the last morning of August. We got many members out here in the central Atlantic. Okay, now watch how this signal for our tropical system continues as we get into the morning of August the 1st. So there's a signal for our tropical system here. Now, the members that do survive, you'll start to see some greens and some yellows. This means there's some stronger low pressures into here. If this survives, you end up getting some pretty strong members into here. But in general, I mean, there looks like there's only 15 at most, maybe 20 at the most at one time, 15 to 20 members out of 51. So, I mean, that's less than 0.5%. I know your eyes are probably going to all these L's up here. This is that homegrown activity I'm talking about. So there's potential a lot of energy can get thrown, off the lower 48 into the Atlantic, and then that can develop too. So it's like you got a bunch of L's running into each other. But it's interesting. You got some pretty strong members right into here. I mean, that's a 944 member, but that's an anomaly, right? Anomaly meaning it's an outlier. So, I mean, you're not, all these other members don't show anything like this. Some stronger members, but nothing like that. So it's very interesting that the members that do survive, sort of this area of the Atlantic and get into the Southwest Atlantic, really try to get their act together. Now, I will tell you, as far as I know, this is in Celsius. You're thinking, man, it's 28 degrees Fahrenheit out there. This is in Celsius. So out here in what we call the MDR, okay, it's 26, 27, 28 degrees Celsius. You convert that to Fahrenheit, you got around 80 to 83, 84 degrees. Okay, so, it's not super warm, but it certainly can generate a tropical system. Now, you see this big plume right here? Let's see what color to use. This big area right here, Southwest Atlantic, a lot of these waters are well above average. So you got if anything gets into this area, water certainly supports not only a tropical system, but a strengthening tropical system. So, 29, 28 degrees Celsius, I mean, that's getting into the mid 80s in Fahrenheit. But if anything, of course, we really need to cool the Gulf down, and we're not in the Western Caribbean. You see this area here, 30, 31 degrees Celsius. I mean, there's some areas out here in the Gulf and probably the Western Caribbean that it's probably in the low 90s. So it's just rocket fuel for tropical systems when it comes to sea surface temperatures. But there's definitely a lot of warm water here in the Southwest Atlantic. So you can check that off the box just as a broad picture for things that support a tropical system. Now, dry air. I don't really have a graphic for that, but there's still a lot of dry air and a stable environment because of that dry air in this area. And I'm just going to draw on this map. A lot of dry air over this area. So these tropical systems that kind of cruise down here or get into this area have to fight up against that dry air. And it really affects them being able to create and really sustain convection. It really is. And in fact, if I was to go back and show you the satellite, you could see it. Like a day or two ago, the convection was really firing. Convection meaning shower and storm activity. I mean, it was really, really firing out there, but it's not able to really get going and develop some low-level features and a dominant vortex to really become a tropical cyclone. And that's because there's a lot of things fighting against it. Now, we have pulses of what we call rising air, favorable MJO pulses, and this creates an environment, a more moist environment for these tropical systems. So I think that's why we're starting to see some things. Now, guys, first off, let's go back to the GFS. We can go a little bit further. Yeah, so it's not a very strong run here. It's weaker than the previous GFS. So we're going to continue to watch that. But now, this is what we kind of nerd out with you guys, right? Steering currents. Now, it's hard to understand what you're seeing on your screen, but just think of that salmon color that you see, like this and this and this. That's higher pressure. The blue, that is lower pressure. And if we had a really deep tropical system, you would see a big blob of blue down here somewhere. But because that low pressure is so weak, it's not really showing up on your screen. So at this time, believe it or not, there is some sort of low pressure right here in this region. And, this is the pattern at 500 millibars, so 18, 19,000 feet up in the air. The lower level currents are probably different. So there's not much push one way or the other regardless. You don't have any kind of dominant Atlantic high pressure out here also. That's one thing to mention. So, we keep this going, and I'm going to show the 12Z-GFS. You see that little blob of blue here? That is our tropical system. And it is being steered lightly by a little bit of ridging on top of this. So the flow around this area right into here that you're seeing, it's very weak ridging. It's not much of an influence. It's steering this system sort of into the Caribbean on this specific run. And I'm just showing you an example, right? But, you keep this going here. And honestly, right now is not a great example of really explaining steering currents. But what's interesting to me is this begins to get stronger. Right here, still weak high pressure on top of this. But the system remains so weak that it's being influenced really by lower level currents. And, it's honestly, there's not really any high influence of high pressure or low pressure out here at all. It's more of just a kind of in between. So this thing's kind of just cruising out here, and eventually it weakens and disappears. Now, there is a pretty consistent signal of a trough showing up over the eastern U.S., and the flow around this trough, this area in blue, would kind of go like this, right? So if any strong low pressure gets right here, there's a chance it would get knocked out to sea. But that's a bunch of what ifs. We got to figure out if the tropical system's going to develop first. So, getting all that off your screen, like I said, not the best example of explaining steering currents because there's not a dominant high pressure out here to really draw around. There's not a dominant low pressure being our tropical system. Now, I will speak a little bit closer to home, switching gears here. What you're going to see here is a bunch of blobs of green, yellow, red, orange, etc. So this is basically energy being thrown down from basically storm systems over land, cold fronts, things like that. And I think we're going to get a lot of cold fronts as we get into August. And these cold fronts might not be what you think, like pumpkin spice latte or anything like that. It's not going to drop us to 58 degrees in Atlanta. It's nothing like that. But a lot of energy is going to get thrown down with these storm systems. And, this is for like next Thursday, July the 31st. You see a lot of energy right here hanging out. Does that try to spin up, do something? That's a lot of moisture over Louisiana as we get into August. And then we get more energy kind of just hanging out over this area. Lower pressure here. We got energy over here. We just got a lot of energy just hanging out over this area. So if, one of these dominant pieces of energy can get over the Gulf or off the coast of Southeast, it's going to have a shot to develop. So, and I think that is why we're seeing so many members firing off into the Gulf and then off the coast of the Southeast and Eastern U.S. from west to east, because it's showing energy getting thrown off the lower 48, if you will. A better way to see this is, once again, looking at 850 millibars. You can see these little features here. You see that spin over the deep south? See the wind barb rotating here cyclonically? So there's some sort of spin. You put that over the Gulf, that's probably going to develop into a tropical system. So there's a lot of little things to watch out here. And here's our main tropical wave that takes over 10 days to get into the Southwest Atlantic. So that's what that is. You see this little spin here? You see this? We just got to watch all these features. It's interesting to me because I just really think we're going to continue to have a really the same pattern that we've seen already over the last couple weeks remain over the next couple weeks. So once again, if any of that energy, right, if any of that energy gets thrown over here or over here, the sea surface temperatures support tropical development. All right, and I know that's not the only thing that obviously generates tropical systems. We got to look at the upper wind pattern. But I think there's two things to watch with this, guys, and with the two things I just talked about. One, just closer to home, and then two, being that tropical wave. Are either one of these things we are watching threatening? Absolutely not, folks. Last thing we'll look at is that signal a little bit closer to home, and as we get past 7 days, you're going to see a lot of members kind of firing off the East Coast. You're going to see a couple members down here too. And that is just that weak signal of homegrown activity. Homegrown meaning the energy comes from our homeland, the lower 48, if that makes sense. And then originates there, then it gets going over the warm waters of the Atlantic. So, folks, that's all I got. Sorry about, this morning with the video. If you're tuning in, you're a regular, person that tunes in. It was a rough start to the day. But we got it together, and we're going to have a good weekend, and I'm going to have you a lot of updates. The last thing I'll say is I wouldn't be surprised if models downtrend with this. A lot of times when it's trying to pick up on a tropical wave that hadn't even emerged over the Atlantic, and models are latching onto it, a lot of times it downtrends. And honestly, I'm already starting to see a little bit of that today. But if you look at the GFS, and let's look a little bit closer to home. Yeah, it likes more of the idea of just energy firing off the East Coast than anything, but it does not get that tropical wave going, really. If you look at the run prior to this, yeah, it doesn't look much different. So we're going to see what happens overnight with model guidance. Do we have a drop-off, or do we have an uptick, or does this remain the same? So we'll continue to watch. That's all I got. God bless all y'all. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll talk again tomorrow morning.